Between the returning production of Armando, Bacot, and RJ Davis, and the influx of freshmen and transfers, is it possible we're not talking enough about Seth Trimble?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Friday, September 1st. How is it already September 2023? Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea. Joining me now, it's regular, and I love it, Coach Bill Robinson, the head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes basketball team. We want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on the show today, as I said, we're going to talk about Seth. We're going to start there, but we also had a really interesting listener question about like practice habits and drills, things like that. So Coach Rob's going to get into some of that. And then, of course, we started it off last week. Story time with Coach Rob. Had a great story last week and cannot wait to see what Coach has in store for us this week. Well, Coach, let me start this conversation about Seth by this came out of a comment from the first show that we did together where we were just kind of looking at things that you saw this summer. And I guess I didn't really realize it in real time, but we must not have mentioned Seth Trimble. And Derek Nipper, who's always diving into the show. Derek, what's up, man? Had this great comment on YouTube. I remember chuckling to myself. And he says, quote, "I have to say, I'm a little concerned that a coach with his access and inside knowledge while talking about UNC's depth and the use of its bench failed to mention Seth Trimble's name a single time." Shots fired, Coach Rob. I love it. I thought he was strides in his game. And Coach, I think it's safe to say that it's just a lack of time and other people we were talking about, right? Like on our end of it. But I think it is important that we do give Seth his due. And so that's what we're going to do in the first segment here today. So I don't want to blow past it. Let's talk about it. And Coach, let's just start this summer. As you were there at camp and on campus, what did you see from Seth in his development from what you had seen last year in his freshman season?
Yeah, first thing off, he's a great kid. I love Seth. I think he's a very valuable piece of this puzzle that we're trying to put together. It's tough when you're playing behind somebody who's projected to be a one and done kid. But saying that, he is definitely improved his jump shot, which is everybody's concern. He only made 1 3-pointer last year. He shot under 55% or whatever it was from free throw line. Those are concerning issues. But he brings an aspect and athleticism that we just don't have. I got a chance to talk to Dr. Jack Ramsey, former head coach at the Portland Trail Blazers back when I was in college. And we talked point guard talk. That's all we were talking about. And he says, you got to have a point guard who can get other people involved. You have to have somebody who can stay in front of the ball. Seth can definitely do that. And then you've got to have somebody who can knock down that jump shot, just a wide open one. He doesn't have to shoot that tough one, but that when Armando gets doubled and kicks back out, he's got to be able to make that shot. And that's what I think everybody's most concerned about right now. I mean, the book to defend him would give him 2 steps, make him hit one. And we like when a non-shooter makes their first one, because that means they're going to shoot a second and a third and sometimes a fourth because they feel like it's their night. So we want him to become more consistent from that 3-point line, and he's got to do that in games. He can do it all he wants in practice, but when the lights come on, that's when he really has to show out again.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so can that offensive game, because the defense is what we hear about along with his athleticism, that's already there. Do you think his offensive game – now, listen, it's not going to get to the same level of where his defense is. I think that's just what it is and who Seth is as a basketball player. But can it catch up enough to make him be somebody that you have to respect on the offensive side of the court?
It definitely does. And he's got the work ethic. He's going to put the time in. He's got great coaching to be able to do it and great resources to be able to get up as many shots as he needs to in a day. And I'm not worried about that. It doesn't have to be coming off 3 screens and catch and shoot, fading away from the basket. It's just got to be that wide open one, feet set, being able to knock it down. He'll be able to create, if it's a late second shot clock or late, half or end of game, he can create something to get to the rim and either get a look or make somebody else better. But that's the biggest thing in my book. If he's making that wide open jump shot, his minutes will go from 10 to 15 or more.
Wow. And he is stout. He's so thick, man. I feel like that just is going to allow that penetration to be all the more easy for him. I always talk about on the show, I'm a big Braves fan. So I think about Spencer Strider's thighs. People call him Quadzilla. It feels like Seth is built just really stout in the low end like that. How helpful is that in terms of getting into the lane kind of at will, matched with his athleticism, I should say?
And he's upper body strength too. And that's the ability to be able to take contact and go through it. He doesn't bump off contact. And then even in the air, he's so strong, he's able to take contact and still be able to finish or make an extra pass where a lot of other guys maybe get fouled. But that strength, even just the upper body strength to be able to hold off, to be able to defend somebody coming at you hard without fouling, without giving too much ground, that's a skill, and he has that ability.
So I want to talk about the role that he plays as probably the third guard on the team, especially after Simeon Wilcher's decommitment. We expect, as you and I have talked about, for the starting backcourt to be RJ Davis and Elliot Cadeau, with Seth being the main guy that can come in for either one of them or maybe one of the bigger guards sliding down to the two like Cormac Ryan or Paxson Wojcik. But Coach, particularly, again, after Wilcher's decommit, how important is Seth as this projected third guard on the depth chart?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And he's going to have to be able to step up for minutes. First half, somebody gets in foul trouble. And again, we've talked about this time and time again. We want to play fast this year, and they want to play fast. We know that. So he's going to have to come in and provide that spark, and it doesn't have to be scoring. But I would expect him, 4 or 5 minutes in the game to just expect to get in there, run 2 or 3 minutes, just be able to keep the tempo going the way they want to. And again, he has the ability. He could play with either one of those guards. He could play the point. He could play the two, next to Elliot if they need to. But man, they're going to be so fast with those 3 guys and be able to get up and down the court. That's what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, and we've talked too about the possibility of some 3-guard lineups with all 3 of those dudes out there at the same time. I mean, just warp speed at that point. I would love to see it. Now, Coach, I know in the college game, I feel like we don't as often as we do maybe in the NBA see like a full-on hockey line shift change in a second unit coming in, right? But I feel like there is some degree to which we think about Seth maybe leading the second unit along with like a Jalen Washington, maybe a Paxson Wojcik, Jae'lyn Withers, or whomever is not in with that first unit. Does he have like those leadership chops to come in and command those guys, get them lined up, and here we go, let's just wear it down, and then when the starters come back in, they just take advantage of it?
Yeah, I definitely think being here for a full year now, it's more of his time. They have the talent to do the hockey change, the hockey lineup. They've got to be able to run 5 in, 5 out. Usually in Carolina history, that's when things are bad, and they just say, well, let's get all 5 of them out.
That's right.
I think it's more about thinking of all 5 of them in. It's just a different mentality of how we think about that. But I could see that lineup. That second lineup's pretty good. And, it just brings a little different dimension to it, too. But, again, you're not going to want RJ and Armando out for very long. But if you can infuse some energy with that second lineup, I think it could be very valuable.
Yeah, and I think that is the college game, is it's probably going to be a little mixing and matching where Seth is in while Mondo's still in, or Seth is in while Harrison Ingram's still in, or things like that. But that would be an interesting talking point for us sometime in a segment, is looking at the viability of a full-on hockey line shift change. That might be a good convo next week, Coach, that we could get into. Yeah. Now, as I alluded to a minute ago, the thing with Seth that we always talk about from the get-go, along with his athleticism, is just what a phenomenal individual defender he is. Not to say that he's not a good team defender as well, but it's like you put Seth on an island and you feel good about it, like Darrelle Revis out there as a cornerback, right? So, Coach, for you as a coach, as you're scouting somebody like this, as you're planning to play against somebody like this that's just a frustratingly good individual defender, how just annoying is that for one of your players when they're on offense?
Well, there's a couple different things you can do with him. One, you can put him on their best player and just say, don't touch. No, absolute no touch. Do not let him get it. Or you play him full court and just wear down that point guard. There's so many good point guards in the league. They want to play 35 minutes. If he goes in for 3-minute segments and just absolutely wears out that guy, don't let him touch it. Make him work 94 feet to get the ball off the floor. those legs go quickly when when everything is hard. And then it comes down to, prime time, 3 minutes left to go, and that guy's trying to make a jump shot, and he's been having to work hard all game. His legs aren't the same. So those are the valuable things. I think he can bring a whole different dimension to the defensive game. And a lot of offense today are just predicated on dribble penetration. And they'll say, okay, well, this guy's going to dribble penetrate, get to the lane. Well, if he doesn't let you get there, it allows everybody else to stay home. There's no rotations. There's no help and recover. And that's really the fundamentals. That's the offensive line in football. If you can't run, it's really hard to have good offense. So if you can't penetrate, it's really hard to set up good offense.
And part of what we've seen in recent years from Carolina's kind of defensive struggles at times is an inability to stay in front of man. And so that is going to be a key ingredient to success on defense for Carolina this year. Now, Coach had a great listener question this week from someone who's never played like organized basketball and just wondering about man, what kind of skills and drills and things are we doing in the practice setting that help prepare for games? And just wanting you to unpack that from your vantage point as a coach, things you look forward to doing. I'm super excited myself to hear from you about this. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Life is always so busy, folks. The last thing I need is to be stressed out trying to buy tickets online. Well, thankfully, there's Gametime, which has hot deals on last-minute tickets for every event you want to go to. Beyond that, I'm always trying to figure out what is my view going to look like from my seat? Am I going to be blocked? Is there a column in the way like at Wrigley Field? Well, the good news is when you're choosing seats on Gametime, they have pictures of views from your seat so you can make sure you're getting exactly what you want before you arrive. So forget planning months in advance. Gametime is the place for last-minute ticket deals. They have deals on tickets right up day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on all sorts of great event tickets. Beyond that, the Gametime guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find a better deal in the same section and row for less, Gametime's going to credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, that's create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Also, as we get into college football season, I want to remind you that Saturday night, 7:30 on ABC's Carolina's first game against South Carolina, the Duke's Mayo Classic there at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. Speaking of which, Locked On is doing something new this football season, kicking up our Locked On college football kickoff coverage. Each Friday, Locked On's going live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering every team every day. Find it Locked On College Football Kickoff live every Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You don't want to miss it. All right, Coach. This question came in from Jonathan Fox, who is, just one of our OGs here on Locked On Tar Heels. An email he sent in to me after your show last week. Let me just read that, and then I'll just let you dive into it. Jonathan says this: I have never played basketball on any level and know nothing about its practice and camps. As far as I know, practice is just scrimmages and shoot-arounds. Dude, that sounds awesome. I'm all in for that. But I know there is way more to it, and I'd love to hear about that. Would Coach Rob be willing to share a few of his favorite drills or ones he finds to be the most important for player development and how they directly affect a player's ability in game? For example, running up downs seems simple, but could translate to the player having the legs late in the game as they improve at that drill. Kind of like you were just talking about a couple minutes ago, Coach. I just don't know what kinds of drills are run and what they really mean. Thanks, Jonathan. I love this question, Coach. I'm just going to let you dive in and respond to this however you want to take it.
Sure. Practice organization is so important. This is my cheat sheet.
I love it. That's great.
Sure, it's 7 pages long, but I'm a little bit OCD. I want everything to be organized in a certain way. You need repetitions in basketball just like you do in baseball. I coached baseball for a year in Texas. Practice was exactly the same every single day. It was horrible. But we need to work on one-on-one defense. We need to work on rebounding. We need to work on team defense. We need to get those transition drills. But I want them to be different every day so the guys don't say, oh, man, this is the same drill we did yesterday. So we've got fast break drills. We've got one-on-one drills. I got from Phil Martelli when he was at St. Joe's back in the day. Did a clinic with him. We have 5 rebounding drills. We've got 4 one-on-one drills. We've got all these different defensive stations that I got from North Carolina when Jared Hass was there. He gave me all their defensive drills that they do. They do stations. They do just like camp. They do defensive stations, and a lot of it's based on how many assistant coaches you have, how many managers you have. I've got 1 full-time assistant. I've got 1 part-time assistant. I've got a GA. When the JV plays, I might have practice all by myself. I don't have any managers. So it's one of those things where I have to know who's going to be there. I got my cheat sheet, and I will dictate practices probably 2-3 weeks out exactly what drills I want. So I've got 7 or 8 transition drills that I like. I'm going to do one every day for a week, and then I just restart them again. So that's how I keep track of how I want to do it. But even a one-on-one drill, some of it's competitive one-on-one, some of it's help and recover one-on-one, where you have to close out and you have to be able to stay in front of the basketball. The transition drills, most of them are 3-on-none, or 4-on-none or 5-on-none. We're just trying to get up and down. We're trying to get the basic fundamentals of the fast break. Then towards the end of them, there'll be some competitive stuff. We'll do 11-man, where a lot of 3-on-2, 2-on-1 type situations where you have to be good in advantage situations. If you're able to get an advantage situation, you have to score or have to at least get a wide open shot, have to get the shot that you want. So we practice all that type of stuff. We do shell drills a lot, especially early in the year. And then once you get through preseason and the games are starting, and you put in your system, obviously, and put in, what sets you want to do in defensive, offensively, terminology, those type of things. But then practice changes once the season, where you watch film, you figure out what you do well, what you don't do well, and then you try to fix things as it goes along. I mean, that's real quick going into what practice organization would be.
I love that. Coach, what is the balance? And maybe I'll ask this both preseason and in season, the balance of like gameplay type drills versus just straight up conditioning type things.
Yeah, I don't, and I didn't as a player like conditioning, just running. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me as a player. It doesn't make sense to me as a coach. It's not fun for me to say, get on the line and run.
Can I come play for you? I'm all in on that.
We want to do a lot of our transition drills, a lot of our conditioning with the ball in our hands. So early in the year, we'll do a lot of that, 5-10 minutes a day. And we really don't play a whole lot early. We want to make sure we kind of break things down and then in the part, and then we put them to hole later. But again, we have 2 hours in the gym before we get kicked out for volleyball or women's basketball. If you go watch Carolina practice, they come in, half hour before, sometimes 45 minutes before, with a manager and somebody to rebound for them, and they get all kinds of shots up before, and then they have a 2-hour practice, and then they stick around afterwards and shoot. We don't have that ability. So we ask our guys to shoot during the day. We ask them, I sent out a schedule today of the rest of the week, what the gym is, so the guys can go in and get shots up by themselves. So that when we do have practice here in a couple weeks, we don't have to do a ton of shooting drills in practice. We'll warm up that way, but a lot of our stuff's got to be done outside of practice.
From a competitive standpoint, are you keeping score often? Are there like rewards for wins or punishments for losses? I'm curious how this whole I'm tired of playing against my own dudes, my own jersey color. How do you keep that fresh and alive and exciting?
We want to do a lot of competitive stuff, even the one-on-one stuff. We want a winner, a loser, who scored the most. If we want to focus on the offense, who got the most stops on the defense. Sometimes we'll just line them up at the top of the key and say, well, okay, one-on-one, if you get a stop, you stay, you get a point. We count how many points you make. Losers run. Winners go get a drink of water. I mean, the punishments are not anything real hard. It's a down and back usually. But we want them to understand that, hey, I don't want to run again. I'd rather go get a drink. So we want to make it as competitive as possible. Even the 2-on-2, 3-on-3, everything we do, we want a winner. Even if it's a shooting drill, we have a shooting drill that we love, that we put a score up on the board, and we have to compete against a score instead of me competing against you in practice. We want to get that feeling of us as a team competing towards a goal. And I like those as much because Then if we fail as a team. If we succeed, we win as a team, and then we can celebrate or we can punish depending on what we did as a whole group, not just individuals in practice.
Okay. Another question, kind of along a similar lines. So let's say we're at an end of game scenario. You'll often hear commentators in a basketball game say, "Oh, this team's practiced this end of game inbounds play over and over and over again." And what is the reality of that? How often are you running specific in-game scenarios? Like time and score on the clock, ball inbound. Let's do it. We have to make this play happen and execute to win this game.
We usually save it to a week or two before the season starts, before we introduce them, because we've been working on a lot of just the fundamentals, the core values of what we're trying to do. But when the season starts, that's a weekly thing. Maybe it's a pregame thing. We get a 45-minute shoot around during the day. That's when we can really focus on those type of things. When we went to play Carolina's JV, we got there a little early. They let me sit and watch their shoot around. That's all they were working on, was end of game situations. Sideline, three seconds left. Underneath the basket, 1 second left. All right, tie game, 10 seconds left, half court. All these different scenarios. And I usually don't write them down. I just, whatever comes to my head at that moment. And we've got a favorite play for everything that we do. And we try to introduce those enough where we want to be able to run them without a timeout. That's the big key, because you never know what the situation is going to be. Right. Scenario-wise, you may have no timeouts, and you got to be able to call play, and the guys have got to know exactly where they're supposed to be, exactly what we're looking for.
Are you a timeout hoarder? Are you Roy Williams?
Well, here's another thing. We get 6 timeouts. We have no media timeouts. So our game is so different. Like, people are yelling for Hubert, call timeout, call timeout. And I love to have 3 timeouts left with 3 minutes left. And with 6 timeouts, I can do that. And we don't lose any of them in the first half.
That'd have to interesting.
But we can keep all 6 for the second half if we want to. 4 fulls, 2 30s. It makes it where it changes the way we coach compared to the way those guys have to coach. So when we do play a Division I game, it's hard because it'll be a timeout, and then all of a sudden there's a media 30 seconds later. I don't know what to talk about. We just had timeout.
What did you have for dinner tonight, buddy? How you doing?
We just kind of stand around, and the timeouts are longer at the Division I games, where we're used to having to get in, get out. We don't have the time that the Division I guys do. Yeah. So it is completely different. We don't have TV timeouts, so we're not sitting there waiting 2 minutes to get back. I mean, we've got to be ready to go, but it changes so much. So I don't blame Coach for not taking timeouts the way he does. I mean, I wish he did. I wish he had 6. I wish he had 6 like we did, and then he was able to spend them the way we would want. But I can control the game more with 6 timeouts than the guys at the Division I level.
Yeah. Last practice question, and then we'll get to story time with Coach Rob. It might have been, I'm just trying to remember who I had this conversation with recently. It might have been you and I, as we were discussing determining playing time and minutes allocation and things like that. But as you're watching practice, obviously that's what's helping you determine who gets on the floor, who plays, how long they play, and how they all fit together, those kind of things. Are you keeping stats in a practice, or is it more like, here's what my eye test is telling me? How do you kind of fall on that?
If I had 6 to 8 managers like Carolina, I would stat everything. And they do. They stat everything. Even a shooting drill. If the guy's shooting, there's somebody sitting there going, make, miss, make, miss, make, miss. And that's hugely helpful. We don't have that. So a lot of what we're doing is being able just to evaluate. And then we talk about as a coaching staff, who played well today, who didn't play well today. And we're keeping track of that. In regards to playing time, we do have an exercise we do early in the year. We're probably going to do it here in the next couple of weeks, where we actually ask the guys what their expectations are for themselves. What's their role? What's their goal? And it's amazing. We had 2 years ago, I think we had 10 guys who said, I'm going to start. Well, we can't start 10 guys. And then we'll calculate minutes, points, rebounds, the major things. And I think we had 1 year, I think the 200 minutes we've talked about before, if everybody played what they wanted to, it would have been 346 minutes. And we would have averaged 170 points and 75 rebounds and 50 assists. And
that sounds great.
Yeah, it's awesome. But we had a freshman one time come in, and he was going to average 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 9 assists. And I brought him in, and ironically, he played very little for us. And I said, if you had averaged all these, you'd be an All-American, you'd be in the top 10 scoring nationally, and the number 1 assist and the number 1 rebounder in the country. And he's like, he had no idea what he was saying. So it just gives a little bit of a head start of exactly what expectations are, so we can at least try to bring some reality to some guys.
I love that. So you're telling me I can't average just shy of a triple-double? That's not reality? All right. Okay, sounds good. I'm not Russ Westbrook, and apparently neither is your freshman.
No.
Coach Rob, great stuff. Thanks for inviting us into some practice habits a little bit there. Jonathan, great question, brother. Thanks for sharing that. All right, folks, it's the moment you've been waiting for. We're going to do it in just a second. Story time with Coach Rob coming at you in just a moment. All right, folks, we are here on Locked On Tar Heels today, joined by our guy, Coach Rob, Coach Bill Robinson, the head coach of the Milligan University Buffaloes. Coach Rob, for 2 decades, has been working the Carolina Summer Basketball Camp and is working on writing a book full of great stories and anecdotes and memories from these camps. And so each week when he's on the show, in the third segment, we have story time with Coach Rob, where he just drops a little dime, a little nugget with us from some of his tales. So, Coach, the floor, my friend, is yours.
Well, I do have 13 chapters, and this is my list of everything. There's a history of Carolina basketball camp. Coaches, stories, Dean Smith, the dorm, Frank Fuqua. I'm so fired. I'm so getting fired. That's a chapter, because all of us feel at some point or another we're going to get fired. A couple other, Coach Williams, Hubert Davis, Eric Montross camp. Those are the basic, chapters of what we're doing. My favorite Coach Williams story. Part of camp is every kid gets a one-on-one picture, an individual picture with Coach Williams. And Hubert does the same thing. Hubert puts in front of the big sneaker wall that they have outside the locker room, which makes it even cooler. The kids love it. But Coach Williams used to just get it real quick. And my group came through, got their pictures taken, went to our first session. Coach Williams took their 750 pictures that morning. After the first session was over, we went to lunch, and there was a TV on the wall, and it was the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, and the Tar Heels were playing. So as I'm walking to the calf, the camera scans up into the crowd, and there's Roy Williams in the stands in Omaha, Nebraska. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. He just took 750 pictures with every single kid here, and now he's in Omaha, Nebraska. Had lunch, went to the afternoon session, had our night session. As a small college coach, I like to go watch the older kids, and walked in about 9:30 to watch the end of the session, and in walks Roy Williams in Chapel Hill again. And I'm like, that's not normal. It's not human. And I know he's got, his private plane and that kind of stuff, but I think all of us after a day like that would have just went home. We would have said, I'm tired. Nobody would have questioned anything, but that's his camp. And that was what he was focused on. And it was nothing for him just to be there early in the morning, take pictures, go to Omaha, fly back to Chapel Hill, and he wanted to be there for camp. So he's special. I mean, those guys who coach at that level are all special, but there's just always something a little bit different about Coach Williams.
Man, Roy Williams, jet setter, by the way, but honestly, it's just the kind of story that's not surprising, because that is who Roy Williams is. Like in and out of the public eye, he is going to be the same man. Coach Rob, great story. Thank you for sharing that anecdote with us. Folks, we just want to remind you, we're continuing our thoughts and prayers continue to be with the whole North Carolina campus community there on campus and beyond as we continue to mourn the events of earlier this week. Again, if you need help, if you need to reach out, please do so. There are contact numbers there. I've mentioned on the show earlier in this week, I'm an ordained minister. I'm a faculty member at a Christian college. Would be happy to chat with you myself if that would be of comfort to you. For now, though, we want to remind you there's a football game coming up tomorrow, Saturday, kicking off the year. Make sure you tune in. College Game Day is going to be there for it. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of great conversation there. That's it for this week and this episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Big thanks to Coach Rob for joining us as always. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. You can follow Coach Rob at Coach Rob Buffs. You can follow me at Isaac Shade. Email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on audio and video formats. For those of you watching, smash the like button to let us know you're here, and leave comments on your thoughts on today's show, whether it's Seth Trimble or the practice habits or that great Coach Williams story. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back with you on Monday, recapping hopefully a win over the South Carolina Gamecocks. But until then, peace.